Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Stankofa II, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're blessed to always be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. And it's a big week, Omari. We tweeted about this, we texted about this, we talked about this. This is kind of the start of a lot of really fun content, a lot of decisions. We don't have to project and predict as much anymore. We can just give our analysis on things. So I'm really excited for this episode, but also the episodes we have coming up here shortly. Before we get started, Omari, I wanted to give a chance. We don't do this a lot. Plug everything, all the articles you've put out, because I'm sure people are going to ask questions and want to know stuff. Let everybody know what you've written about here recently.
Yeah, I mean, I've been writing a lot of stuff this past week. I have a lot of coverage from the Trajan Langdon conference on Friday, which a lot's happened since our last episode. They parted ways with Monty, and then press conference happened like 2 days later. So a lot of coverage on that. I have draft coverage from the past few days. I have a new mock draft going up the morning of the draft for Wednesday. And man, just all sorts of content. Like, it's that time of year. I have trade projections looking forward. Just go on freep.com to check all of that out. And then I'm going to plug this on the pod too. Like, check out Bryce's Substack, because he has a lot of great notes for the draft prospects. And I've actually been winning on that among all the other analysis that's out there. So check that out as well.
I appreciate it. I actually was going to plug today. Wes was a part of this. Blake Silverman over at DBB. Usually Omari was a part of these mock drafts we do over on the Basketball Bulletin Substack. Omari wasn't able to because all of this news dropped. But like I said, Wes and Blake were, and we did a predictive mock over on the Basketball Bulletin. That one's completely free. That's a project I do with Trevor Lane and Keith Smith over there. And then, you graciously shouted me out on Twitter with all of my scouts. I have a lot of Piston-specific stuff on my Motor City Hoops Substack. A few other things, guys, just some house cleaning. So Wednesday night, this stream will not be live. I will be over on Game Theory with Sam, but on the DBB YouTube, Wes and Blake and the DBB crew will be live for, I believe, the entire first round on Wednesday night. Not just the Pistons pick, but an entire first round. So you guys lock in over there and watch that with them. And then we will be back Thursday morning with everything we got going on, Omari writing, me podcasting, all of that. We will be back first thing Thursday morning for our reaction to whatever Detroit does in the first round. And then, yes, guys, we will talk food a couple months from now. So if you guys saw that on Twitter today, I gave a little peek behind the curtain. I said, Omari, what are we going to do during the doldrums? And he said, doldrums equal food takes or something like that. I said, I'm out. I put it on Twitter, and I got immediately overruled.
Everybody wants to food takes, Bryce. I feel like we took a break for a while, which is totally cool because we are a basketball first pod, but we have to remember our roots too. You know, this was part of the early journey, the Lay's potato chips on the peanut butter. I don't even know how that became a thing. Like,
I don't either.
Still the thing everybody brings up. I have to go back to like episode 3 and figure out how that became a thing. But we will get to it. But the next month, obviously, after this week, we have free agency, and then Summer League, and me and Vegas will Bryce will be in Vegas for a couple of days as well. So it's going to be a fun month, guys. I think we're excited.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. David says, all right, guys, I'm here cutting the grass and looking forward to a good listen. If I hurry, I may be able to enjoy the remainder of the episode over some bourbon. Drink responsibly, but, adult, have one in your house there. Relax. You deserve it after mowing the grass. Omari, never move next to me. If you're mowing the lawn before my wife is awake and it ruins the rest of my day because you piss her off, I don't know how good of friends we're going to be.
Well, here's the thing. This is probably another off-season topic for later in the summer, but I'm like very anti-grass in general. Like, I never want to be responsible for a lawn in my life, so you really don't have to worry about that.
What is your anti-grass? You don't want to pay for it? You don't think it's environmentally friendly? What is the issue here?
It's like all of the above, but it's just work. It's literally just adding work to your life for no real upside at all. Like, kids don't need, well, I guess it's cool to have grass if you have kids, but like we were playing basketball out on the street, on the sidewalk, like we were fine. You have to water it. Like, if your grass looks bad, like, people judge you. Like, your neighbors are like, man, like, brown spot, brown patch. Like, look at them. They don't care. It's like, I don't want this. Like, I've got a house. I didn't get a lawn. Like, that's just something I'm burdened with. So I'm perfectly cool and never having a lawn to take care of at all. I just think that's extra work.
Chili Damon says, cut it real low on a hot sunny day. It will burn out and not be a problem. That's very, Mari's house is about to have no curb. But listen, you're talking to the wrong guy here. I'm very, very proud of my lawn. So for some people who don't know, I worked for a landscaping business through high school, and then it was my full-time job when I first got out of college after I stopped college coaching. So mowed lawns, put in sprinkler systems, landscaping, all of that stuff, Omari. So I'm very, very particular about my yard. Nobody else touches it. I get really upset when my kids walk through it and ride their bikes through it and all of that stuff.
Not even for the kids. Who was this serving?
I don't like my kids playing on it at all, to be quite honest. But we have a trampoline that's ground level, so I have to let them play in the back and all of that. I will say, though, I feel like I stepped up the game on the block, and now everybody else on the block has looked at our yard and been like, oh, we're going to step up our game with theirs as well.
They're so annoyed. They are so annoyed at you. They're like, you started caring, and now I got to care.
They are not annoyed. Preach them. Why is everybody on your side?
Look, come on. Like, nobody's ever made a good argument for grass. Like,
what is going on? This is worse than the food takes. I actually understand when people cook me for my food takes because I have no whatever. I'm right. You guys are all wrong.
Bryce gives to the neighborhood. That's what I'm saying. They're like, man, now I got to wake up at 8 a.m.
Like, don't be mad at me because my lawn game is... What did you say? The game is the game or whatever you said to me today?
The game is the game. I'm saying the game is the game. That's right. Like, if you take care of your lawn, everybody else has to. Like, that's what I was getting at.
That's the game.
Like, we could all collectively not care, but there's always that one person.
He said you're raising kids, not a lawn. There we go. No, I'm with Bryce. There we go. We get one person. There we go.
Wes is both, like, vehemently against my take. Like, Wes is saying Omari is nuts. This take is unhinged. And he's asking Bryce for grants.
I got you, Wes. I can help you.
System recommendations. This is insane.
Next time I'm in Detroit, we'll put it in for you. We'll do it all. Listen, we got way more important things than to spend this amount of time talking about.
We'll come back to it. Yeah.
I want to give my guy Harry a shout out. He said, "What up, though? I was over with them on the Order of the Blazing Horse. And it's a really fun pod. They got a little thing that they got with it, but we talk legit stuff over there. They're really smart. Good stuff. So check out that one. And then, oh no.
Yeah.
Hate yard lurking.
I guess that's where I get it. Okay, my dad.
Here's the
I'm
thing.
I'm also allergic to grass. I put that out there too. Like I have horrible seasonal allergies. Like it's really bad.
Oh my gosh. Listen, I love Mr. Sankofa. He's my favorite. I'm blaming him though. This is his fault. This isn't even your fault. He ruined you. Yeah. And it's okay. It's okay. And then I got to shout out Richard Brooks. He had a funny one here. Whenever we started late, 7 or 8 minutes, he said, is Tom Gore's in traffic. So shout out Richard with a nice one there. Here's the thing. Marcus says, what up, though, fellas? All right. Omari, speaking of the press conference, we don't have to talk about you guys waiting. You also, speaking of things, your fault. That was your fault. You sent out a tweet. We're all here. It's going to get started on time. And then an hour later, nobody was there. So you jinxed it. That was your fault that it got started an hour later. There we go.
I did.
Okay.
I did.
Your takeaways. Where do you want to start? When you talk your takeaways from the Trajan presser or Monty Williams firing, all of this kind of the same thing?
Yeah, like it all kind of goes in one. Like it seemed like for most of the summer, really like most of the off season, and we've talked about it, but the feeling was just that Monty didn't have the support, really to come back if that's what the new president wanted to go with a new coach. And it did seem like there's actually really strong momentum for him to come back, but I think in the end, like the org just wanted a fresh start. So we'll see like what happens with that. Maybe they'll get a little financial relief next time he gets a coaching job. But beyond that, I thought Trajan came off really well. Somebody asked me after like what I thought about it in general, and it kind of caught me off guard because usually after press conferences, I'm just thinking about how to organize information and then how like figuring out what to write and whatnot. But I didn't necessarily have like an opinion. But if you want a coherent plan for how they're going to move forward, and here I'm talking about eating assets and eating salary in exchange for assets, I should say. And then with that, also just honing in on shooting. The Fred Vincent hire obviously hinted toward that. Seems like there's a coherent plan, and he didn't put a timeline on it, which was to be expected because who's to say how long this thing is going to take to get off. But just, for somebody inheriting a team with $64 million in cap space, it seemed like he had a pretty rational plan for what to do with it. And we'll see what that looks like and how it shakes out. But I thought everything he said made sense given the position the team is in.
Matthew Vogel says, can't believe I finally caught a pod live. This is great. We appreciate it. Obviously, everybody listening, watching right now, we appreciate you. Hit the like button, subscribe button, catch us live all the time. Again, we'll be back Thursday morning. If you're listening on podcast, subscribe, rate, review, all of those things. We love it. We really appreciate it. All right, let's go with this first, Omari. Monty Williams is gone. we all know I don't have a whole lot of interest in getting into the 12 months that was Monty Williams. We know it wasn't good. It was an awful year, forgettable year. I don't think anybody is going to think that we really have to defend him getting fired or anything like that. Monty's moved on. I think everybody was ready for a new start, all of that. Here's my thing. What does the new coach look like? I don't even want to throw out names because I think we learned 12 months ago when everybody was ready for Dwayne Casey to be gone and everybody was excited about Monty Williams or Kevin Ollie that maybe we don't really know much about coaches and whether they're going to be successful or not. I don't know what we learned. I feel like I don't know. I learned that I don't know anything and that giving an opinion is kind of, for me, not very smart, but I can say what I would look for in a coach. So if you want to throw out some names, that's great, but what would you look for?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it unfurls. We've talked about some of the candidates. I think James Borrego, is a candidate. Well, I guess we haven't talked about it, but I read about it last week. I think James Borrego has a strong chance. But just from talking to Trajan, not just during the press conference, but sort of off to the side after, he really just emphasized winning a leader, like a leader of men. Somebody who can really work well with young players, obviously knows the X's and O's aspect, but somebody who could just really come in and just sort of own that leadership for a young team and really establish good habits and things like that. So a young player coach, right? Maybe that's a coach with younger energy. We've seen, coaches like Will Hardy come in and like really gel quickly with their rosters. And really, that's sort of the route I think a lot of rebuilding teams have gone with over the past, 6-7 years. Like even 5 years ago with Taylor Jenkins, where he wasn't super proven and he's done a good job in Memphis. So obviously that's not James Borrego. There can have some assistants too, but I expect to get somebody in who can really hone in on the player development aspect and really sort of light some fire under these guys.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think a new level of energy is what I feel like would be great also. Just somebody that and I've said, if I wasn't a pound the table, Dwayne Casey needs to be fired, I was probably known as a Dwayne Casey supporter. But one thing I always said about Dwayne Casey was I did want to see a little bit more offensive creativity. And I hope whoever gets hired, I think that will be important, is to be creative with the offense, because no matter what happens this offseason, well, I shouldn't say no matter, but there's a chance this offseason that there is still some spacing issues and maybe there's some clunky fits and stuff like that. I want a coach who at least is going to try to figure out if Cade and Jaden Ivey are going to work. If Trajan sees or wants to see these two guys try to play together, then you're going to have to be a little bit creative with them. You can't just stand these guys in certain spots, get some actions, get some movement, those type of things. And then whether it's the head coach, whatever it is, if it's an offensive minded head coach, then bring in an assistant coach that's really defensive oriented, or vice versa. I know Sean Sweeney's a name that comes up a lot. Obviously, that would be your defensive-minded head coach if he is hired as the head coach. Well, then I would be interested to see who he hires as an assistant coach in terms of the offensive stuff. I want to see offensive creativity, Omari, but I think the energy thing is something, I just think it's important. At the end of the day, you have this young team. Most likely, it's still going to be very young. Just somebody that kind of has the appetite for and the energy and enthusiasm for growing these youngsters up and just understands what it's about. And I do want to, as we transition to Trajan, it does seem like Trajan was adamant about having one kind of focus and goal and path. Did you get that from the press conference as well? Because that's something I've talked about and I think is important. The organization has just one vision here moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what they've emphasized, is just everybody being on the same page. Like, I think we have seen this front office get a bit splintered, especially once the losses start piling up. And, everybody has an idea for how to sort of get this thing going, right? And you look at a guy like Trajan Langdon, who's coming in with an outsider's perspective, which is probably important in the grand scheme of just moving this thing forward beyond the past era. And Tom talked about him being like a CEO a lot. Like, I think at the end of the day, a lot of things are said during press conferences. You just kind of have to see how things play out. I think we go over press conferences to obviously build hype and say things that sound good. But with that, yeah, we are an adaptable coach who doesn't take stats and analytics as a personal. And so, yeah, I just imagine that they're going to go with a coach who is an extension of the front office, essentially, right? Like, it remains to be seen what they go with as far as analytics and everything else, but they're absolutely going to bring in a coach who's on board with everything the front office wants and understands coming in that this is going to be a rebuild job, right? A gut job. And what's interesting is that they have not hired a coach like that really in a long time. Stan Van Gundy was brought in to win Dwayne was brought in to win. He became a rebuild coach. And then Monty essentially was brought in to win as well. So it's really a very different shift in philosophy compared to the last decade, really, of coaching hires for this franchise.
Travis Rosinski says, I'm here for the food debates. Why are we talking ball? What's up, Omari and Bryce? Yes, you missed it at the beginning. So if you want to go back, if you weren't here from the start, the first 5 minutes were food and lawn takes and all of that. So yeah, I'm interested to see who they hire. Somebody brought up by Summer League. Summer League, I think, starts on the 11th. Obviously, you'd want to staff together so you can pick which assistants are going to coach Summer League and all of that. I mean, ideally, they would know who their coach is before they make this pick on Wednesday, because again, if you're going to have this shared vision, you would want to draft a player that this coach is going to like and fits what's going on in his system and all of those type of things. So what did you mentioned a little bit earlier, what did you think just in terms of the vibe of Langdon with the roster, how he's going to try to build this out specifically in the short term? I think you mentioned, and I think one of my biggest takeaways, and we'll talk draft in a second, trading out, all of that. Let's save that. But in general, I think there was a specific mention of taking on quote unquote bad money for future assets, but that bad money being players that could actually contribute. Am I paraphrasing that correctly? Was that kind of your vibe with maybe a little bit of how this cap space would be spent?
That was my vibe. He talked, as you said, he talked about both, right? Like eating salary for assets, but also bringing in veterans who can really lift the floor and sort of get these young guys the support that they need. Maybe you can check both boxes at the same time. Like, let's say, like, this is probably an extreme example, but obviously there's a lot of speculation about Zach LaVine. And if they just end up salary dumping him, like if you get a first to take on Zach LaVine, and that's a lot of salary, but obviously he can still play. It's not like he can't play. It's just that he's been hurt. So there's a lot of risk with that, but he would accomplish your goal essentially of doing both, right? You're eating salary for a first round pick, and now you're even in first round picks. You don't just owe a future one anymore, which opens up a lot of flexibility. But you're also bringing somebody that can play. Just whatever speculation name, Andrew Wiggins, like he's had some, I think, just some behind the scenes stuff he's been dealing with. Obviously, a guy that can still play if you take on assets and you can sort of rehabilitate, I guess, for lack of a better word, some of these guys, then maybe you're in good shape. Or maybe you do both, right? Maybe you just take on bad salary. You don't expect much from it, but because you have $64 million, you can still invest about $30 million of that into whatever free agents. You might be able to get two really solid guys around $15 million per. Those are all options when you have the most cap space in the league. So it'll be some juggling for sure. I'll be curious to see how you want them to approach it, Bryce, but it seems like they could probably check both boxes just depending on who's trying to be dumped.
Yeah, real quick. Sharon Dalton says, Omari and Bryce, will you guys be in Vegas for the Summer League? We will. I will be there the first weekend, Thursday night through, I fly back out Monday morning. So essentially Thursday night through Sunday. You'll probably be there a little bit longer. We will plan on...
same, actually.
Okay,
yeah,
perfect.
like 12 to the 15th, but yeah.
We will definitely plan on recording an episode like we always do, kind of become a tradition. The first time we ever met and recorded before the Pistons Pulse was in Vegas, but we'll try to do one together like we did last year. So yes, we will both be there. So if any of you guys are out in Vegas, that's always one of the coolest things for me, Omari, is when we're walking through arena and somebody randomly just like, hey, Bryce, hey, Omari, whatever. So guys, definitely say what's up and we'll come over and talk to you. I always enjoy doing that. How did hear from Thomas Hardy? Then we'll answer this one, then take it to the break. Says, do you guys see the JJ presser? Love to talk about game is changing and he is going to use analytics and evolve. Do you guys feel the same? I only saw bits and pieces of it. Here's my thing with analytics. I do buy analytics to a point. I think they are an important part of the game. I think they make sense. I think sometimes people misuse them or misrepresent them and what they mean or what they're trying to tell you. I think about that with the 3-point shooting stuff. It's not just about threes are worth more than twos. It's also about floor spacing. It's about offensive rebounding. It's about things beyond just the numbers. But I've never coached at the NBA level, obviously. And the 1 year I did was very low Division I. There are more things that go into it. This is why I say I don't think we know about coaches, Omari, because there's so much that goes into personalities, connecting with players, demanding the locker room, holding players accountable, seeing the right vision for players, right? Like me and you can watch the same game, can watch the same player and come away with two different visions of him. Wes and I have talked about Wes, I'm going to need the pronunciation guide for Tinjan Salon. I believe Tinjan Salon. I will get it right. I've been saying it wrong. But Wes and I I've seen him just a little bit differently. So there's a lot that goes into it beyond just analytics, Omari. Hey, yeah, shoot at the rim, shoot from the 3-point line. There's all sorts of other factors.
No doubt. And I'll take us into segment 2 briefly, but what really did stand out about Trajan talking about spacing is that he didn't just say, yeah, we need shooting. He talked about it in context of moving the ball and cutting down on turnovers. Now, I did ask him his assessment of the roster, and he admitted, like, hey, I was in the Western Conference. We had our own stuff going on. We saw the Pistons twice. So, I still have a lot of deep dives to do. But that was just a very specific thing for him to say, especially when last season they struggled to shoot, but also were the league's most turnover-prone team or among them. So I think going back to analytics, just for him to immediately address the correlation between the two to me shows that he's thinking like big picture, right? Like, how do we maximize these guys? It's not just, well, we need guys that can take threes over twos, right? Because we do have guys that can shoot from mid-range and it's worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what the numbers say. It nobody says don't take mid-range, Omari. They just say if you're a 35% three-point shooter, you need to be better than 50% from the mid-range, or the numbers don't add up. If you're insane from the mid-range and not any good from three, then take the mid-range shots. And it is, the defense is going to give that. So if the defense is in drop coverage, maybe you're going to do it a little bit more. Like there's all sorts of nuance with it, but I think analytics have made the game better whenever we do use it right. Batman K says California native, but diehard Detroit Pistons fan. Just want to say Bryce and Omari do a fantastic job breaking down my Pistons. Good job, fellas. Thank you. We appreciate that. Actually, let's go to break, and then we're going to come back with this question from Jonathan Schwartz, or his comment, because we talked a little bit about this before we started today. So we'll go to break. When we come back, we'll start with that comment from Jonathan.
All right, we're back with segment 2, and we're going to start to dive into some draft stuff. We're going to start with this comment from Jonathan Schwartz. I don't think they want to get all that better. It's pretty clear Langdon doesn't want to miss out on the 2025 draft. Like, I think that's a valid point. Like, obviously, that's the Cooper Flag draft, and not just Cooper Flag, but there's several players at the top who could be transformational for the Pistons. But I would also say that that's just a natural consequence of inheriting a 14-win team. Like, there's probably only so much you can do to meaningfully move that needle forward until you actually have like a genuine star you can build around. I'm not saying K is not going to be that. I'm just saying most rebuilds are some form of stasis until you really get the gears going on that, and then you figure out what could add, and then you really start to invest in that. So I would say if I'm a president inheriting a 14-win team, like I'm mapping out the next 3 drafts. Like I'm just doing this with the expectation that's going to take longer. And if we beat expectations, cool. But I don't think you set high expectations or put a clock up to get better, especially when you know that those types of prospects are coming along.
And listen, guys, we're 12 months away from the 2025 draft. Yeah. And so there's a lot that could change in terms of who plays well, who explodes, all of those. Willie brings up Nolan Traore. That's a name. Ace Bailey, VJ Edgecombe. I like Common Malawak. I'm really interested to see how he looks. Drake Powell, Trey Johnson, all sorts of dudes that can play a little bit. So, and maybe it ends up being a flat draft like 2024, but I think there's a little bit more than just Cooper Flag where it's not number 1 pick or bust, at least for me right now. Now, do you want to be in the top 5, the top 3? Sure, but we've just seen this play out for 3 years where this team had one of the worst records and still picked at 5. We just saw the team with the 10th worst record jump all the way to 1. And so what I would say, and I was going to talk about this a little bit earlier when just team building, I think you asked me, I have changed a little bit of what I feel like this summer, Omari, I don't think for a little while I bought into potentially a Brandon Ingram or somebody like a second-ish star to get some buckets and really help move this thing forward. I've kind of reverted back to actually what Andrew Schleck talked about. Let's just fill this out with quality NBA players, really good role players that can space the floor, defend, and help this team, this organization figure out what is Cade Cunningham, what is Jaden Ivey, what is Jalen Duren. I don't think doing that, Omari, is going to get them the 35 wins or something like that. I think I said on a recent pod, I think it was Order of the Blazing Horse, get to 25 wins. Like, can we make an 11-win jump? Can this team make an 11-win jump? Maybe a 13, get to 27, 28. You're still going to finish with the 6th worst record or something like that with odds to jump into the top 5, top 3, all of that. I would rather do that than win 15 games again and have the worst record and then still have a 50-50 chance of falling to 5.
No doubt. And this is going to lead us into our draft debate a little bit. But again, yeah, I look at this draft I was going to make a point, but like I completely forgot my point. Like this is the first time I was having something on this pod. Like I had a point in my head, and then it came back to me, and it completely slipped my mind.
We were so excited for this one, and I will say, Wes, I feel like we've had more mess ups in the first 25 minutes than we've had in a while. Let's get into the draft because I know that's what we have coming up soon. We can talk. We're going to have a little bit of time between the draft and the start of free agency to talk how this thing is going to build out real quick. Troy Weaver did get a position with the Washington Wizards, so just wanted
good luck to Troy.
Yeah, good luck to Troy. I know Pistons fans can have their feelings, all of that, whatever. I get it, but he goes back to the DMV area, gets a job there.
My point came back to me. I'm just making it real quick, and we can go on to the draft.
You're good.
We had this debate on social media earlier where, I tweeted the other day, like, I think the best player available at 5 might be Devin Carter. And I'm not saying the Pistons are going to take up at 5 or anything else. I'm just saying, in my opinion, I'm watching this dude, Devin Carter, and he's really good, and he might be the best player there at 5. When you look at this draft a few years down the road, and a lot of people were talking about, well, does he fit? This and that. And then this morning I posed a question, why are we talking so much about fit? Like, this is a 14-win team. Like, they just need structure. Like, they just need guys who can fulfill necessary roles. And I agree with you in that sense, where it's like, yeah, maybe it's not like an Ingram type swing. Maybe it is just let's get a vet that can protect the rim. Let's get a big wing that can shoot and also hold their own defensively. Maybe not lockdown guy, but at least do that. Let's add some defensive specialists. Let's just add these basic things that we lacked so that we can begin to turn the page and really see what guys like Ivy, Duran, Asar look like in a more stable environment. So I do subscribe to that. Like, I do think, in that sense, this offseason is really not about the big swing or fit or anything. It's just, let's just get some good players and then we can move forward from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about this where this team was one of the worst in the NBA when it came to three-point metrics. It was one of the worst in the league when it came to turnovers. We know the defense wasn't good. And on top of that, they fouled and put the other team on the free throw line all the time. Wes and I talked about this one. Those seem like the floor raising type of things, Omari, where even if you just shoot the 3 average, turn it over at an average rate, and don't put the other team on the free throw line at just an average rate, maybe you can, win some games more than 14. And it seems like any guys that can do that, you don't have to get a star to be able to do those type of things. It's why I always go back to, I stand by liking the Monty Morris move last off season. The Joe Harris one, I was wrong 100%. It was not worth it. I get it.
Yeah,
Monty Morris,
we didn't realize how injured he would be as well.
Yeah, and some people say we should have. I get it. That's fine. Call us out for the Joe Harris one. I'm cool with it. But with Monty Morris, what does he do? He makes threes and he doesn't turn it over. I think that would have worked if he wouldn't have been hurt. And again, maybe people should have said, hey, you should have known he was going to be hurt. Back to Devin Carter. Here's my thing, Omari. I don't think they'll take Carter at 5. I don't think so either. I think Carter's might end up being a top 10 pick for those saying that 5's way too high. I think it's too high. I'd rather trade back and get him. I think Devin Carter has a real chance to end up in the top 10. Yeah. And I think he's definitely a lottery pick. But if I said, what would you look for next to Cade Cunningham in the backcourt? Shooting, somebody that can second side create, and somebody that defends on ball on the perimeter against the other team's best player. You know what Devin Carter theoretically does, and all of these prospects are theoretical, space the floor. He played point guard in college, so he can second side create, and he is supposed to be one of the best point of attack on-ball defenders, definitely in the first round lottery. So in terms of fit, that was my big thing was he does fit, depending on what you want with Jaden Ivey and what you think about him, but I think he does fit in the backcourt. Now, you can make an argument you're too small with J.I., Sasser, and all of that. But my other thing is we get into this, Omari, they're going to draft over somebody at almost every position outside of just a couple. If you draft a big, if you draft somebody in the backcourt, the only thing would be really like a 4-man. I think that's why Reese Shea. But I didn't understand the questions about fit with Devin Carter.
Yeah, I would say a lot of people just saw 6'2", and they're like, why are we taking a 6'2" guard? Some people said, well, we have Sasser. I saw some people say, well, the league is going away from small guards, so why would we do that instead of a player with more upside? Which, like, I'm not saying those are not fair points. I just think it undersells what Devin Carter is as a player just to say, oh, well, he's 6'2". He has a 6'9" wingspan, like a massive wingspan. And he isn't just one of those dudes who has a massive wingspan but doesn't use it. Like, he uses it. He is a dog on defense, one of the best defenders in the draft. I feel good about him defending any player up to like 6'6", right? Like, you could put Cade on the bigger player, but absolutely he's going to plug a hole for you defensively in that backcourt. He is an insane rebounder. He averaged over 8 rebounds a game. He was like the craziest outlier rebounder, one of the craziest outlier rebounders in college history to be 6'2". And that's because he has bounce. Like, he's a great athlete.
Yep.
And Bryce talked about the playmaking. But the last aspect to him that I think completes it is that he shot 37.7% from 3 on tough volume. He was taking them from deep range, like even some from the logo. Like, they had some injuries, so he was the main focal point for the opposing team's game plan. Like, they were throwing defenders at him. He still shot a good percentage. And to me, that's enough of a sample size in one season for me to think that this guy is legit. Like, he is everything you want pretty much in a starting modern guard. And I compare him more to like a Josh Hart or a Derek White than I do really any other, point guard. Like, he's more of like that hybrid, maybe slightly undersized off guard who just does so much stuff and is so great defensively that you don't even think about his size. Like, you're not going to look at Devin Carter like a 6'2" player. He plays like he's 6'6". So I'm not concerned about that at all. And if you move back from 5, which, like, I think there's a great chance they do, Trajan said it himself on Friday. To me, that's one of the guys you look at in that 8-9 range. Like, can you get Devin Carter if some of the other wings are off the board?
YouTube user brings up a good point. I think drafting guards in the first round for 5 consecutive drafts is annoying to fans. I get it. I understand it. And here's the thing. They should take a wing/forward 100%. Like, this is why I continue to talk about Matas and why I still have these dreams of Zachary Risacher falling to 5 somehow. And we talk about Dalton Connect. I mean, at the end of the day, I see a lot of people that like Dalton Connect. He has his own issues with everything else. Steph Castle is bigger. So, Cody Williams, I think that's a little bit high at number 5. But again, if we're talking about trading back, he makes a lot of sense. So I agree that drafting a wing or a forward like Salon, and I agree with it 100%. My only point is that Devin Carter is very good, and I do think he makes sense next to Cade Cunningham. It probably makes a lot more sense if you have some other thing with Marcus Sasser, or if you were going to trade J.I. or something like that. I completely get it. I just didn't understand where people really, really hated it. I don't think he's a non-shooter, as Truth says, but I do have some questions about his shot because it was a 1-year sample. So he didn't shoot over 30% from 3 until this season. So I do have some questions about how sustainable it is, but that dude put it together on both ends this year. He had all the usage offensively, and he was taking all the defensive matchups, disruption. And I agree with you. I think he's a multi-positional defender, even at his size, because of his wingspan, his strength, and his athleticism. So
I didn't even mention 3 stocks per game, but it was like a block and like 2.8 steals or something like that, or a steal and a half. Like, to average a block a game as a 6'2" guard is crazy. Like, but he has a lot of stats that pop it that way.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's what, again, I don't think he's a non-shooter, as some people are saying in the chat. I'm just saying that I do have some questions. Is it really going to be there or not? But let's talk about a few of actually, let's just get this over with. You mentioned the potential trade back. Let's start on the other side. Do you think that there's a potential trade? Like, do we see some fireworks at the top where the Pistons trade up for something? I mean, there's more and more buzz that maybe Risacher goes 1 to the Hawks. It sounds like Sarr isn't in play, but isn't the betting favorite. I don't know what the betting lines actually are, but odds on favorite to go number 1. Is there anybody else you would trade up for? Nobody else other than Risacher makes sense to me.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a guy in this draft I would actually trade up for. The only player I would trade up for is Klingon, because I think to get a guy like that on a rookie deal really fills a major hole for like the next 4 years minimum until you have to pay him. And even then, he's probably going to be worth paying. But beyond that, and I mentioned that example, like, let's say Memphis wants Klingon and they are like, hey, we'll give you 9 for 5 and some other draft capital or something. Like, that's a team where Klingon makes a ton of sense. So I could see that. But beyond that, I don't think there's a guy in this draft I would trade up for. And I think just given that the Pistons really want to value the assets that they have, unless there's a young guy that a team above them would take in lieu of a draft pick, that the Pistons are pretty much out on, which that's a lot of ifs. I'm not saying that that's going to happen. There's probably just not a lot of avenues for them to move up just simply because they don't have that future pick. But but moving down, absolutely, I think seems like a much more likely certainty, just given that, as you mentioned, there are a lot of teams that are looking to get into that 4 through 8 range where some guys are going to go quick.
Yeah, I don't see anybody they trade up for. It doesn't make sense to me. It would take assets. They're already at a deficit in terms of future picks, they still owe the one to the Knicks that hopefully eventually conveys and all of that. People brought Klingon slipping to 5, allowing for the Pistons to trade down is probably the best case. I kind of agree. I think the scenario where that happens for Detroit on draft night is somebody other than Sarr or Klingon goes 1. Obviously, you can't have Klingon go 1 and then be there at 5. So like Ricochet goes 1, the Wizards sprint to the podium to take Sarr at 2. And then unless somebody jumps them to get to number 3 for Klingon, I could see him falling to 5. I don't see San Antonio taking him at 4. Where would you be comfortable trading back in terms of the Pistons? I know we've seen a lot of these. You have Memphis at 9. I don't think the Thunder would trade up for him, or, how far are you willing to move back, I guess, with this?
Yeah, I think that's the key question, because I think for me, it's like, well, one, how many guys in that range do you feel really good that, could still be worth whatever you would get at 5, which I think 5 is just sort of like this, I don't want to say no man's land, but it seems like there's like some certainty with like the top 4. Then you get to 5, and it's like, I don't know how this is going to break down. But I would like absolutely Memphis. I would move back to 9, because if I could get Devin Carter there, there's been a lot of talk about Saloon today, who I think is intriguing. Personally, I'm not sure if I'm there as far as him as a player, but he absolutely is one of the biggest upside things you can make. But I mean, even beyond that, like there's just so many players who could justify taking in that range. I think if you took a Cody Williams and like that, 7 through 12 range, you could feel pretty good about that. I like Tristan da Silva. Like, I think he's really solid. If you're like 9, 10, 11, you start talking about him a little bit. Jarrett McCain, if you're so comfortable with a guard, like there's just so many, to be good guys in that range that I almost like being at 9 more than 5, just because the value proposition becomes a lot better.
Yeah, I have 8, 9, 10 guys kind of in my top tier. And yeah, like Truth Teller says here, this draft is no man's land. There isn't one complete player. They all have a flaw. I agree. I think the best way to say it is, I don't like to say that it's an awful draft. I think it's just very flat, especially at the top. And my favorite range is 10 to 20. I think that's where value starts to get really good. As somebody brought up Deron Holmes in the chat earlier, I love Deron Holmes. He may end up going in the teens. He may end up going later. If you look at mocks recently, he's going at the end of the first round, a lot of times to the Nuggets. And so, somebody brings up Khalil Ware. Again, not a guy I love in the lottery, but a guy that I'm really intrigued by. So these bigs that can space the floor would be very fascinating to me, Omari. I think it would probably take a double trade back unless somebody really loved somebody at 5 and was willing to give up some real assets. And Pistons, like if the Pistons move back to 18 or something and they got real assets to do that, I don't know why somebody would do that. I think 18 is Orlando. I don't know why Orlando would do that. They're not going to do that. But if the Pistons would do that and get some future stuff, I would be cool with it. It's just, I think that's where the value is. So the closer you can get to that, the more I'm comfortable with it. Every time I come up at number 5 in a mock draft, if Ricochet is not there, which in some of them he actually is, I just did one today where he was actually, I just don't know where to go. I don't believe in Matas' shooting. I don't believe in Steph Castle's shooting. Reed Shepherd, Devin Carter, these guys are smaller guards. We've talked about that. Topic doesn't make as much sense to me. Ron Holland is very boom or bust. Klingon becomes, what do you do with Duran? It just becomes very convoluted at number 5. So I would love if they're on the clock at 5 and trade back.
Absolutely. I think this is the perfect draft to trade back in. I'm going to go ahead and bring us to segment 3. And if you have any questions, feel free to bring them in.
Yep.
And otherwise, we'll just look through our last handful of guys who the Pistons could look at 5. All right, we are back with segment 3. So let's play this game. I think a lot of people would agree universally that 5 is sort of a weird spot to be just because you're not getting the certainty you usually want right there. What player do you feel the most certain about at 5 that's going to give you the return on value? So it's not necessarily like an upside question, right? Like if this player does X or this player does Y. What player just do you feel best about? Like, I got a good NBA player with this pick at 5.
Okay, so who's gone? Is this like Sarr is gone, Ricochet is gone?
Sarr is gone, Ricochet is gone, and Reed Shepherd is gone. let's just say everybody else is available. Those are just the three guys I just can't imagine would fall past four.
Yeah, so Stephen P brings up Klingon. I think that makes a lot of sense. Klingon, I think, at least is a really good defender that play finishes on the offensive end. I think Connect is the opposite of that. I feel really good about Dalton Connect and that he's just going to be able to come in. And the floor is he spaces the floor at a super high level. I think he's got more juice to his offensive game even than that. The defense is a real concern, but I think you're going to get some sort of value out of Dalton Connect's career. Some of these, I like Steph Castle. I'm more nervous about the shot than other people are. And this is where like even the Fred Vincent stuff is, okay, how much do we believe in Fred Vincent? Because if you do, then him and Matas Buzelis become really intriguing to me if I feel like Fred Vincent can fix their shooting stuff. But yeah, I think Klingon or Dalton Connect are probably the answers for specifically what you're asking.
I feel the same way. And I think what's also interesting about Klingon is that his value will hold beyond the draft. You know, like we've seen teams take players and essentially just sort of sit tight until a different deal opens up. I'm not saying the Pistons would do that. I'm just saying I think Klingon is probably the one guy there. If it's just from a value proposition standpoint, a big who's elite and drop like he is, can see the floor like he can, lobbed, right? Like everything you want in a modern center of that archetype, at the very least, of the more rim running archetype. It's just, man, like I just can't imagine why a team that needs a center, like it could be at any point in the season, right? If you're committed to Durant, you know, you just figure it out. But I agree with Klingon. I also like Connect. Like I just think he's a pure bucket getter. You don't have to think too hard about him. I don't know if he's a long-term starter or what, but I think he's a guy that can probably give you a pretty solid 12 to 13 a game, I think, even as a rookie, just with the way he could shoot. Let's get into a couple other guys. We do have a few guys on this list here. I recall you being a Ron Holland fan.
Yeah. I've not for Detroit. I've never been a Ron Holland fan for Detroit. I think Ron Holland, when you ask what is a valuable archetype in the NBA, I think two-way wings would be one of the very first things that people bring up, right? I think a floor spacing, rim protecting big is maybe the most difficult to find. I don't know. And I think it's kind of a cheat code. So I'm talking like the Chet Holmgren, Kristaps Porzingis, obviously Vic is getting there. Those type of bigs are insane. I'm talking about two-way wings that can get buckets on one end in any way, not necessarily just floor spacer shooters, but get buckets and then defend on the other end of the floor. And I think Ron Holland is the guy that has a chance to be that. My problem is my percentage chance for him actually hitting that has gone down a little bit even throughout the process. But I can't quit that archetype is valuable in today's NBA. I can't quit that the Ignite program was a complete disaster and was so bad they completely just wiped it out and got rid of it. And so I've held on to that just a little bit. His floor, as people, I'm sure somebody's about to bring it up in the chat, is a Hamidou Diallo, who's not in the league. So I understand the floor is extremely low. The medium outcome to me is something like what we saw from Derrick Jones Jr. this year with the Dallas Mavericks. So you would hope that you get more than that, but maybe there is a medium outcome where he, on a right situation, right team, can still be valuable. But as somebody said, you already have a star on this team. That's not great if then that's what Holland becomes. So I don't love Holland for Detroit, but for a team that has a chance to take a swing, like I think Utah at 10 is a really good spot for Holland. And I think that's probably where he ends up.
Yeah, I'll say the one thing with the Holland and the Sarr, like it's not ideal to have two young wings who can't shoot. Like I agree with that, but I trust Holland much more as a ball handler. I just think he's much more fluid with the ball, much more fluid getting downhill. And I think he's going to draw crazy fouls at the NBA.
Sure.
Like, I think he's eventually going to get to become a player where as he tightens his handle, as his shot improves, even without the shot, he's going to get to the line a lot. Like I just think he just has some innate gifts that in a draft like this, that's probably worth a little bit more.
Jacob Hamburg says, do you think Ron can pass? I think Ron is unselfish. He will get the selfish tag a lot. I don't think that he is selfish, but I do think he struggles to see the floor, make quick decisions. Ron Holland is an off-the-ball player to me. He is a wing playing off the ball, transition, come off zoom actions, those type of things. And then he can really defend. He has a motor. He's had that reputation since coming out of high school. So very interesting. I'm a little sour on him for the Pistons. I want to bring up a name to you because I've seen it a few times in the chat. Rob Dillingham, not even necessarily for the Pistons unless they traded down. At least for me, it would have to be a trade down. What do you think about him in general? Where are you at with Rob Dillingham as you've looked into this draft a little bit?
I love his game. Like, I really do. Like, I think he's one of the most electric scorers in the draft. Like, his range, his handle. Like, as far as small guards, you want a small guard to have his type of scoring package for him to survive. And I don't think he's going to have any issues scoring or moving the ball in the NBA. It's just the other end. Like, he's probably not going to have a real chance to become a good defender. And that's why I think with him, the fit is so important. Like, I just don't see him as an option for a Pistons team that just has so many other holes elsewhere. And if they have one thing, it's a primary ball handler. Like, that's probably the only thing we know about the team is that they have a primary ball handler. I think Rob can play next to him. It's not that Rob can't play next to Cade. It's just, I don't know if you can live with a Rob Cade backcourt unless you have like a Victor Wembanyama or Rudy Gobert sort of lurking in the background to clean everything up. So I actually love Rob Dillingham's fit with the San Antonio Spurs for that reason, right? Like, I think that's like absolutely perfect. But for the Pistons, I love his game. It's just tough for me to see what need that feels for a team that's already so porous defensively and probably has that primary guy already.
Yeah, I'm lower on Rob Dillingham in general to compare to the consensus. I had somebody hit me up today, like, where do you have him? I showed him and they're like, oh my gosh, let's talk about this. My thing with Rob Dillingham, he's very, very small. Like, people will complain about Reed Shepherd being small. Dillingham is smaller. And I compared him to Malik Monk because we like to mock him to the Sacramento Kings whenever a lot of people were thinking Monk was going to leave. He was like 30 pounds lighter than Malik Monk coming into the draft. We compared him to Marcus Sasser, and I think the wingspan was substantially smaller and just his size. So I have some concerns. In a vacuum, Rob Dillingham offensively is about as talented as this draft sees. I mean, just when you take everything else out of the equation, that dude can get buckets. And I think he can, in terms of passing and playing on ball, I think he can do those things a little bit as well. Let's talk about Cody Williams. Jacob Hamburg says, is there a case that he has the highest ceiling, highest floor, or the most likely to achieve something close to his ceiling among the top wing group? Where are you at on Cody Williams? Seems like there's a lot of buzz. Pistons fans are really going there with him.
He is the ultimate. You got to watch the film to sort of get an understanding of his strengths and weaknesses as a player. And it's been interesting to see the wide range of opinion with him as well, where there's some people who are like, I feel like if his brother wasn't Jalen Williams, he wouldn't be seen as a lottery pick. But other people are like, oh, this dude's a starter. Like, he sees the floor so well. He can defend. He does this and that. I would say I like his footwork getting to the rim. I think he has great footwork getting to the rim. I think defensively he's solid. But there's just some weird numbers. Like, I am a numbers guy to an extent. And I more so look at numbers for like red flags or just like outlier things that make me believe in a prospect more. And with him, just the lack of blocks and steals, on top of the fact that he wasn't like a shutdown defender. He's pretty good, but he wasn't like a lockdown guy. Like, what is his calling card in the NBA? Is he just sort of a jack of all trades, master of none type guy? Or is he going to become elite, really, or above average at enough things to where he really can become a long-term solution for you at the 3 or 4? Like, I'm curious to see how you feel about him, Bryce, but I just don't know if he's there. I don't know if he's like an elite playmaker. I don't know if he's an elite defender. The jump shot needs work. I think he could get it downhill, but beyond that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm probably the wrong guy to ask. I've been a little bit lower on Cody Williams going back to high school. I didn't love him as much whenever he was coming out, and then he went to Colorado, and it was a lot of the same things. I don't know how to evaluate somebody who lacked some of the aggressiveness and the mentality that I wanted to see from him. Maybe it was the injuries. Maybe it was the other guys on his team. I don't know. You know, it's easy to look at the 3-point percentage and go, oh, well, but it was 42% on 1.7 attempts per game. He only took 41 threes all year. He only played 24 games. But then he only shot 71% from the free throw line. So if we're going to question people's numbers, like, if you want to tell me Devin Carter isn't a shooter, I will take his shooting numbers and metrics from this last season over Cody Williams. If we're trying to project things, he has real touch. He may be one of the best finishers of all the guys we've talked about, just in terms of his touch around the rim.
He had like the highest field goal percentage at the rim amongst all the players in this draft, right? Like it was like 75%.
I think somebody had a tweet where it was comparing the guys just at the top.
Yeah.
And like if you go to synergy, you go to half court at the rim, I think it's around 70%. It's one of the really good numbers. It is.
Yeah.
It's a really good number. And so then that makes you think, well, maybe he can play through the contact and the slight frame and all of that isn't a concern. But Wes and I have talked about this. Are we thinking he's going to fill out his frame just because Jalen looks the way Jalen looks? I don't know if that's what we should do. We've seen siblings who don't build out their frames the exact same way. And so I don't know what to think about Cody Williams because of what you said, though, Omari. He does a lot of things very well. I think he can pass, but I don't think he's like an on-ball creator. I think he has good feel for the game. I think he's a good defender, but I don't think he's a great defender. So do all of those things combine to a really good player? They might. But a lot of times we talk about somebody needing elite skill. What is their superpower? And he just doesn't seem to have one. So I think with Cody, this will be a learning experience for me in terms of, can I take all of these things together being at a certain level? And that's actually his quote unquote superpower, is that he does all of these well. But at the end of the day, if he can't shoot it at a real level, then I don't know that any of it's going to matter.
And I see him as more of a mid first round guy than maybe top 10. Like I know he's been mocked like top 10, 12-ish. But yeah, it's just tough for me. Like I love his finishing at the rim, but typically when you're that type of player, you hardly get blocks or steals. That's a red flag as far as how you're going to be able to handle the NBA and that level of physicality. And then it's just the shooting. Yeah, like I would love him at 15 or 16. I'm just like, it's going to be a learning experience for me as well, right? Like how much of this stuff, just pure processing, how much of that translates in the touch around the rim, which he does have, like, you know, with both hands, how much of that translates to being able to space the floor. Let's talk about Saloon. I know you kind of hinted earlier that you and Wes had differing opinions.
So real quick, I've been saying it wrong. So listen, guys, I tried to go listen to videos of people talking in their games, and I swear announcers called him Saloon. It came out today. I think it was NBA Communications, Wes. I think they had the initial tweet. It's Trajan Salon. Trajan Salon is how it's pronounced according to that. So I think that was the big one that I had been mispronouncing. So I want to get what your thoughts are on Salon, and then I will give mine.
So I don't have like really, he's like one of the prospects I don't have really deep like thoughts on, just because like throughout this process, like he just wasn't a guy that was going to go at 5. So I haven't dove into him as much as some other prospects, to be 100% honest. Like what I have seen, I think he has the tools to be a really good wing. Like I think his shot looks fine. Like I think he plays really hard. I think he plays some physicality. I like all of those things. I think I do kind of fall into the Cody Williams issue. Like, what is this guy's skill going to be? Are you just comfortable with just waiting 2 or 3 years for the rest of his game to really fill out? And again, he's in that range for me where it's like, I think he could be a good pro. Like, I just don't know if, you know, this is a team that can necessarily wait for him to begin to show that promise. It's also a possibility that he's way ahead of the curve compared to where people think he is. Like, I think he's an intriguing prospect. I think if you look at all the wings of this draft, I don't necessarily feel like Buzelis or Cody Williams or all these other guys are a significantly better prospect. Like, I kind of put all those guys in the same range in my head. But Solon, I love his athleticism. Like, I think his shot looks really solid. Like, I'm curious to see what he's able to round out. But I do think if you want to block a Clay, like, let's talk about Clay. Like, that's somebody you could eventually form into a pretty good basketball player.
So I'm going to put a link in the chat for Sam and I over at Game Theory. You guys can click on that and go over there. We did a huge breakdown on Salon. I think it was like 40 minutes. I'm just going to read you my little thing. I think this is up on the Motor City Hoops. Prototypical 3-and-D forward that possesses all the qualities that go into that label for me, outside of, yes, this archetype, you have to be able to knock down, catch, and shoot three-point attempts, which is something that he is doing so at a quality level and has a free throw percentage that gives you more confidence. So quality, that may be a little bit too much. Ended up 32% on 4.5 attempts, 75% from the free throw line. I don't have synergy pulled up right now, so I'm not exactly sure what the straight catch and shoot numbers are. Mechanics of the jumper, while slow, are also something I'm willing to buy. Well-rounded off the player on offense. He's instinctual cutter, offensive rebounder, and may make as much of an impact in offensive transition than any winger forward in this class. Omari, when I tell you this dude runs the floor like nobody else, he runs the floor like nobody else. It's not just for him to catch and score. he draws other defenders into the lane that gets his teammates open. So I think that's a real impact depending on what the new coach wants to do. Will leave something to be desired early in his career in terms of playing with the ball in his hands, but contribute to the offensive flow with ball moving passes. Absolute worker on the defensive end, might play with as much intensity and energy as anyone. Backs that up with a good understanding of team defensive schemes. Plenty of nuanced fundamentals he has to iron out, though, specifically screen navigation. And at times, he will be able to make an impact until he gets those things ironed out. But I don't think he's going to come in and start and play 30 minutes a game as a rookie. But I do think the rim running, the cutting, the defensive energy and intensity could get him some playing time off the bench at a position that this team, quite frankly, Omari, they need. They don't have that guy on the roster right now.
No, they don't. I mean, if you're taking I think you have some of the same logic as a SAR last year, right? Where this guy just has physical tools you can't teach. And if the shot could come or this or that could come, he really makes a lot of sense. I know a lot of people are wondering if he's the next Sekou. And I think Pistons fans have like PTSD from France, just, with the lack of success they've had with fresh prospects over the last 5 or 6 years. I don't know the difference between Sekou and Solana as prospects. Like I did not evaluate Sekou as a prospect in that capacity, so it's hard for me to make that comparison. I would say the swing skill with Sekou that never came together was his shooting, obviously, but also I think there's a level of intensity you have to play with to really, cut it in the NBA that he didn't play with per se. So I'm not going to say these guys are similar prospects just because they're raw athletic guys from France. I really can't compare them at all. But I think with that, everything I've heard about Solana, just about him as a competitor and, just as a person leads me to believe that it's not going to be an intensity issue with him.
Yeah, I wasn't here for Sekou either. He was already on the team even when I started the Pistons stuff, and I wasn't doing draft stuff at all until the last couple of years. This is the part of it I hate. I just don't have the history. People will ask me, I think I was doing a Thunder podcast, and they asked me to compare him to Ousmane Dieng, and I'm like, I didn't evaluate Ousmane Dieng. So you guys tell me what Ousmane Dieng was supposed to be, and then I will be able to compare whether, and it ended up that they weren't alike at all because Ousmane Dieng was supposed to be able to play with the ball in his hands and do some things like that. That's not Solana. Solana is not going to play with the ball. He is an off the ball forward that plays in the corner, cuts, dunker spot, offensive rebounds, those type of things. So I think he's interesting. Let's finish up with a couple here. We talked about the bigs, so I just want to shout out here, really starting Tyler Smith's game. He's my sleeper guy this year. What do you think about, you would have to really be able to trade back. I mentioned Deron Holmes, Kyle Filipowski, Tyler Smith. I don't think they want to trade back into the first round. That doesn't make any sense at all to me. Do those guys interest you, I guess, is my question, Omari, if they traded back twice or really took a big leap into the late lottery, middle of the first round in terms of those kind of archetypes of bigs that can stretch the floor a little bit?
Yeah, the back half of this draft is interesting because I don't know about the bigs in this draft necessarily. I don't know if Tyler Smith gives you enough outside of the shooting aspect.
Sure.
He's still very much developing. I may be a little bit lower in him than the average, but I do see the appeal with him. But if I'm moving back to that extent, I'm looking at Johnny Furphy. I think he is just big wing, can really shoot the ball. 19, I think he's going to be good. I'm looking at Darren Holmes, I'm surprised he's being marked as low as he is. To me, he should be in that range of, 14 through whatever. Yeah, I like 10 through 30 in this draft more than the top 10, I think, in general. So if you're giving me enough assets, I'll move back to 22 and still probably feel pretty good about it. I don't know if you feel like it has that type of depth, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, no, that's 100% where I'm at.
Yeah.
And I should mention Solana is only 18 as well. He doesn't turn 19 till August. So I do factor in age a little bit with these guys. I think it matters at the end of the day. There's a difference between a 18-year-old and a 23-year-old and how long they've had to develop their bodies and work on their games and how many jump shots they've taken in their career and all of those things. So I do think it's important to factor those things in at least a little bit. Yes, I think this is where the value really starts to get good is 10 to 20, somewhere in there, because people have been talking about Zach Edey, even Omari. I think Zach Edey is going to end up being a really good value where he gets taken. I don't think the Pistons end up in that range with him, but if you're drafting Zach Edey in a range where, hey, come in, play 18 minutes a night, in the second unit and just go terrorize second units with just his size, his ball screening, offensive rebounding, all of that. I understand that stuff a little bit. So I don't know that there's any other guys we really need to talk about here. I think we've hit on everybody. I do want to give my guy Mickey Jacobs a shout out. He was doing the Order of the Blazing Horse podcast as well over there with Harry. So we talked a little bit about what this team could do trading back. I know there's talks of, with Memphis, it seems like their 2025 first top 4 protected gets thrown around a lot. When I did a mock with Sam, we traded back to San Antonio at 8. I can't remember what year it was. I think I talked him into a 2027 top 7 protected best of. It would have been the best of whatever they had. And so I think you could get a future first round pick with some protections on it, don't you?
I think from Memphis for sure, because they are pretty much at capacity as far as like players they need to commit to long term. Like they got G.G. Jackson, who blew away all expectations last year. And then my name, Vincent, his last name's slipping me, but
Williams.
Like, Vincent Williams. Like you still have 2 other young guys who you're going to have to pay money to at some point. You've already locked down Jaren, you've locked down Bane, you've locked down Ja. You need to fill that center hole. But if you do that in this draft, man, you look at that roster, it's like this is the group that we're moving forward with. And if you need to trade somebody, then you do that. But no, absolutely. Like, I think that's a team that could probably sacrifice a future first and feel pretty fine because they're not trying to get more guys into develop. I think they're moving to the next phase of their team building.
All right. So Hanover Fist brings it up. Wes had it in the outline. We're getting to the end of the pod. Real quick reminder for everybody that's still listening. We will be back Thursday morning, pretty early, I would assume. And so you guys can get in Wednesday night live stuff with Wes over on the DBB YouTube. You can listen to the other podcasts, all of that Wednesday night. And then we'll wake up with you fresh Thursday morning. You can get our thoughts and analysis on that pick. And then we'll be back on Sunday or Monday with the second round pick and previewing free agency and all of that stuff. So just make sure you guys tune into that. You're following Omari on Twitter for all of his articles. You're following me on Twitter for stuff I'm going to put out on the Substack, all of that. And you follow Wes on Twitter as well because he's doing great things as well. He asked, or she asked, who y'all taking? So call your shot here, Omari. And is it a trade back? If it's a trade back, you don't have to say compensation. But at the end of the day, just who do the Pistons walk out of the first round with?
The safe pick still feels like Buzelis. Like, I think it's really tough to predict trades. So I'm assuming that they stay at 5. I'm going to go with Buzelis just because I really do think he checks the most boxes. So if they move back, who knows? But at 5, I'm going to go with Buzelis.
All right, everybody, I want to see your guys' as well. So if you're watching live here, put it in the chat. We'll bring it up on the screen and we'll take a quick poll here as we're finishing off the episode and type it in, whether you're on Twitter or YouTube. Buzelis seems like he makes a lot of sense still. If it was Buzelis, you think it's just there at 5?
Yeah. I can see Klingen too, just because if you want to build a strong defense, that's probably the best route you could go with that 5th pick as well. And of course, that would bring a lot of questions about Duran. But hey, when you win 14 games, I think you have to consider everything.
Here's what's amazing. Here's what is amazing. We have Connect, Castle, Salon, Cody Williams, Ron Holland. Those are the first 5 and then Klingen. So of the first 6, 7 that come in, we get different names right away. I think that tells you exactly where things are at. There's a lot of Cody Williams here, which I think is interesting. Thomas Hardy says guarantee trading back. I'm going to go trading back. I don't know where. I think they stay in the top 10. They trade back. And I'm saying either Dalton Connect or Trajan Salon. And I'll say Dalton Connect just because I feel like there's a lot of Salon conversation out there. Wes, everybody's just gonna be like, oh, you're just copying off everybody else. So I'm gonna go something a little different. Dalton Connect has been one of my guys, Bronny. Amazing. Thank you for this. Trade back to get Bronny. I love it. Dalton Connect has been one of my guys throughout this whole thing. So I'm gonna go with Dalton Connect. Yeah, here's the thing. David Giancola calls it. We're just gonna have to trust the decision. I think we get a couple things on Wednesday night, Omari. We get a little bit of insight into how Trajan sees this roster, what he feels like, all of that. And we actually just get to analyze some stuff, right? No more predicting, talking about multiple different players. Thursday morning, we get to wake up, maybe talk about a trade, but we have one player We get to talk about who that player is and how they fit with the team. So that will be a lot of fun. I'm excited for it. Like we talked about at the top, we got a lot of good content coming the next few weeks.
Yeah, I'm excited for it too. Like it's go time. This is the point of the offseason we've all been waiting for. It'll be fun to learn more about Trajan and his thought process and what he's prioritizing initially with this Pistons team. And yeah, I'm excited. Like I think that Thursday morning pod is going to be a lot of fun.
Yep, absolutely. Appreciate you guys all tuning in tonight. If you haven't, guys, real quick, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. It helps us. It helps us grow the pod, all of that. If you're listening on podcast, we haven't got a review in a while. Leave us a review. We'll read it here on the pod. We'll shout you out. We appreciate everybody that tunes into these live. We love the engagement. It was really good tonight in the chat. Everybody kept it clean and nice and friendly. So we always enjoyed that. Thank you guys so much. And we'll talk to you Thursday morning.
Yeah, I'll close this out. Big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and big shout out to us as always. And we'll talk to you on Thursday.